The moment my son pushed me away from the delivery room door, I felt nothing but the stinging heat of shame. After driving 11 hours through the night to meet my grandson, I was told I did not count as family. I had no idea then that I was actually being shoved out of a cold-blooded financial scheme. That $18,700 bill waiting in my name was just the beginning of how they planned to bleed me dry. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am a 61-year-old widow who had just driven 11 hours straight from Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Dallas, Texas. My lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and my eyes felt like they were packed with sand. But none of that mattered as I rushed through the automatic doors of the Starlight Women's Center. I clutched a pastel yellow gift bag tightly against my chest, inside of which was a hand-knitted blanket I had spent the last 3 months perfecting. I was running on caffeine and pure adrenaline because my first grandson, Jonah, was about to come into the world. I kept replaying the phone call from 2 days ago in my head. It was the reason I was here. My daughter-in-law, Lila Brooks Hart, had called me, her voice dripping with a sweetness that I had desperately wanted to believe was genuine. "Mom Evelyn," she had said, her voice sounding small and needy over the line. "Please come. I'm scared. I want little Jonah to be born, surrounded by family. I need you." That plea had been enough to make me pack my bags in 20 minutes. I wanted to be the grandmother I never had for my own children. I wanted to be there. The lobby of the Starlight Center smelled like lavender and expensive sanitizer. It looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital. When the receptionist looked up with a practiced smile and asked for the patient's name, I straightened my spine, ignoring the wrinkles in my travel clothes. "Lila Brooks Hart," I said, unable to keep the tremble of pride out of my voice. "I am the grandmother. I expected a visitor badge. I expected to be pointed toward an elevator. Instead, the double doors leading to the delivery wing burst open. Ryan, my son, came stumbling out into the hallway. He looked pale, his hair a mess. But the moment he saw me, his expression did not soften into relief. It hardened into panic. He rushed toward me, stopping just short of a hug, his body acting as a physical barrier between me and the delivery room. He refused to meet my eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice tight and breathless. "You need to leave. You can't be here." I blinked, confused, my grip on the gift bag tightening until the paper crinkled. But Lila called me. She asked me to come. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, shifting his weight from foot to foot. She changed her mind. "It's too much pressure. Go home. Mom, Lila only wants to be with family." The word struck me like a physical blow. Family. He said it as if I were a stranger who had wandered in off the street, as if the blood in his veins did not come from me. Before I could process the insult, a shrill, theatrical scream echoed from down the hall, loud enough to carry through the heavy doors. "Ryan, don't let anyone make this harder on me. I can't breathe." It was Lila. The agony in her voice sounded sharp, but there was an edge to it that felt performative, designed specifically to reach us. Ryan flinched. He looked at me with something resembling pity, but mostly it was fear. "Please," he whispered. "Just go." A security guard, a large man with a kind but firm face, stepped up beside me. He did not touch me, but his presence was a clear command. "Ma'am," he said softly, "we cannot have any disturbances. It affects the patients. I have to ask you to wait outside the unit." I looked at my son. I looked at the doors that separated me from my grandson. I could have screamed. I could have pulled out my phone and shown them the call log. But I was Evelyn Hart, and I had spent 30 years maintaining composure in bank boardrooms. I would not ruin my grandson's birthday with a scene. I swallowed the lump of hot coal in my throat, nodded once to the guard, and turned around. I did not go to the hotel I had booked near the city centre. I felt too small, too ashamed to walk into a nice lobby. Instead, I drove 3 miles down the road to a motel with flickering neon signage and peeling paint. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, staring at my silent phone. I told myself that it was just the hormones. I told myself that once Jonah was born, Ryan would call. He would apologize. They would invite me back. But the phone remained black and silent. The morning sun sliced through the thin curtains of the motel room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. I had spent the entire night staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting for an apology, waiting for anything. The silence was heavy and suffocating. Every minute that ticked by felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I checked the signal strength a dozen times. I restarted the device twice. But the problem was not technical. The problem was that I was being deliberately ignored. Finally, at 8 in the morning, a text message from Ryan appeared. I lunged for the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jonah is here, both healthy. Let Lila rest. Don't come. We will send pictures. That was it. No exclamation marks, no joy, no, we wish you were here. Just a cold, administrative update. Attached to the message was a blurry, low-light photo of a swaddled bundle. I could not even see my grandson's face, just a redness that might have been a cheek. I immediately pressed the video call button. It rang for a long time before cutting to voicemail. I tried again. This time, a text came through instantly. Doctor is checking her. Can't talk. An hour later, I tried again. He is feeding. Lila needs privacy. By noon, the pattern was undeniable. I was not a participant in this event. I was a spectator being kept in the cheap seats. I sat on the edge of the unmade bed, feeling a profound sense of foolishness. To distract myself from the stinging rejection, I opened my message history with Lila. I scrolled back months, looking for the moment things had changed. But instead of distance, I found excessive closeness. Mum, don't worry about the details. Just leave it to me. She had texted 3 months ago. You are the most trustworthy person we know. She had sent 2 weeks later. My thumb hovered over a message from a dinner visit back in Dallas last autumn. I closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me. We had been sitting at their dining table. Lila had been flustered, complaining about the complexity of the new hospital family portal. Mom, Evelyn, she had said, sliding a tablet across the table toward me. You are so much better with technology than my mother. Could you just help me test the login I need to make sure the emergency contact permissions work? I remembered laughing, flattered that she thought I was tech-savvy. She had pointed to a box at the bottom of the screen. Just sign here. She had urged, her finger tapping the glass. It just verifies that you agree to be the contact person if something goes wrong. I had trusted her. I had signed my name with the digital stylus, a sweeping, confident signature, without reading the wall of small text above it. Why would I read a contract between family members over a pot roast dinner? The memory made my stomach turn. 2 days passed in that motel room. 2 days of silence. 2 days of being ghosted by my own son. Finally, on the third morning, Ryan answered the phone. His voice was flat, devoid of the anxiety he had shown at the hospital. "Honestly, Mom," he said, and I could hear him walking around in the background. "We thought you couldn't make it in time anyway. So, you might as well go home. We have everything under control. But I am here," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I am 10 minutes away. Go home." "Mom," he said, and then the line went dead. The humiliation was total. I packed my bag with trembling hands. I checked out of the motel, shielding my eyes from the bright Texas sun. I drove to the hospital one last time, but I did not go up to the room. I left the yellow gift bag at the front reception desk with a note that simply said, "For Jonah." I walked out before the receptionist could ask me any questions. The drive back to New Mexico took 11 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. I cried for the first 100 miles, hot tears blurring the highway ahead. But somewhere around the state line, the tears stopped. The sadness began to harden into a cold, sharp clarity. I arrived at my small house in Albuquerque late that night. The silence of my own home felt different now. It was no longer lonely. It was a sanctuary. I walked straight to the study, a room I rarely used since retiring. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and dug past the tax returns and old greeting cards. My hands found what they were looking for. It was a thick, leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges. Embossed on the cover in fading gold letters were the words Mesa Ridge Mutual Bank, Fraud Investigation Guide. I placed it on the desk. I had thought that part of my life was over. I thought I was just a grandmother now. But as I ran my hand over the cover, I realized that if they wanted to play games with numbers and signatures, they had picked the wrong opponent. I was not just a grandmother. I was an investigator, and I had a case to solve. It had been exactly 1 week since I drove away from Dallas with dry eyes and a hollow chest. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID did not say Ryan, and it certainly did not say Lila. It flashed a name I did not recognize, Pure Birth Wellness Group. I assumed it was a medical update. Perhaps a bill for a hearing test or a follow-up appointment that had been accidentally routed to my number. I slid the green icon across the screen. "This is Evelyn," I said, my voice raspy from days of not using it enough. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. This is Sarah, your dedicated obstetric financial specialist from Pure Birth." The voice on the other end chirped, overly bright and aggressively friendly. "I am calling to finalize the details of the Jonah Hart birth sponsorship. First of all, congratulations on the new grandbaby. We just wanted to walk you through the first installment of the Legacy Family Package you authorized." I frowned, pressing the phone harder against my ear. "I am sorry, but I think you have the wrong number. I did not authorize any package." "Oh, silly me. I must have the file open on the wrong tab." Sarah laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Let me just verify. You are Evelyn Marie Hart, maiden name, Vance born, July 4th, 1963. Social security number ending in 4522. The air left the room. My blood ran cold. Not with fear, but with the sudden, sharp clarity of a person realizing they are standing in a trap. They had my social security number. They had my maiden name. "Yes," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "That is me." "Perfect," Sarah continued, oblivious to the shift in my tone. So, as per the agreement signed 3 months ago, you are the primary guarantor for the $18,700 birthing suite and holistic care package. We have the first scheduled deduction of $3,000 set for tomorrow from your savings account ending in 909. We just needed a verbal confirmation for the bank. $18,700. My retirement savings. I never signed that, I said, my hand gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Send me the contract. Right now. Of course, it is already in your secure inbox. I will resend the link. A moment later, a notification pinged on my laptop. I clicked the link. There it was. A digital document, dense with legal jargon, outlining a premium birth experience that cost more than my first car. And at the bottom, clear as day, was my signature. It was my handwriting, the loop on the E, the sharp cross on the T. But what froze my heart was the attachment labeled Biometric Verification MP4. I clicked play. The video was grainy, taken from a front-facing camera on a tablet. It showed me, sitting at Ryan and Lila's dining table, smiling foolishly. Just sign here. Lila's voice came from off-screen, sweet and helpful. On the video. I laughed and used my finger to sign the screen. The timestamp was from that dinner 3 months ago. The metadata labeled it consent to financing. Lila had not asked me to test a medical portal. She had recorded me signing a blank digital field and then pasted that authorization onto a predatory loan agreement. She had framed me. She had used my trust, my desire to be a helpful grandmother, to steal nearly $20,000 from me. Panic flared for a second, hot and blinding. But then, something old and dormant in my brain woke up. It was the part of me that had spent 30 years investigating loan fraud at Mesa Ridge Mutual Bank. I took a deep breath, pushing the grandmother aside and letting the investigator step forward. Mrs. Hart, are you still there? Sarah asked. I am here, I said. I forced my voice to sound shaky, confused, like a helpless old woman. I'm just a bit overwhelmed. My memory isn't what it used to be. Could you just hold everything for a moment? Do not process the payment yet. I need to check my balances. Well, we can hold it for 48 hours, Sarah said, her tone hardening slightly. But the contract is binding. Mrs. Hart. I understand. I lied. Just give me 2 days. I hung up. The kitchen was silent again, but the cold feeling was gone. I stood up and walked to the closet in the hallway. I pulled down a heavy box I had not touched since the day I retired. Inside were highlighters, red pens, and my old fraud detection manuals. I carried the box to the table and dumped it out. You chose the wrong old lady, I said to the empty room. I am not the prey. I am the one who used to hunt people like you. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I did not name it Grandson. I typed in Case Jonah, Pure Birth, and Lila. I began to type, listing every date, every text message, and every interaction. A plan was already forming in the back of my mind. I would not just cancel the contract. I was going to let them think they had won, let them get comfortable, and then I was going to bury them with the very paperwork they had forged. They wanted a legacy, I would give them one. I did not scream. I did not throw my laptop across the room. Instead, I put on my reading glasses and poured a fresh cup of coffee. Investigation is not about passion. It is about patience. It is about peeling an onion layer by layer, even when the fumes make your eyes water. For the next 6 hours, I systematically dismantled every digital interaction I had ever had with Lila. I exported emails, archived text messages, and downloaded every attachment. I found the invitation to the prenatal yoga class she had sent me back in November. I found the link to the so-called family photo portal. Mum, just click accept so you can see the ultrasound pictures. She had texted. I pulled up that old email. It looked innocent enough, decorated with pastel stalks and clouds. But when I highlighted the entire page, my cursor caught something at the very bottom. It was text, coloured in the lightest possible shade of grey against a white background, almost invisible to the naked eye. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. By accepting this invitation, you agree to act as primary sponsor for the Legacy Family tier. My stomach turned. She had not just tricked me into signing a document. She had tricked me into clicking away my rights months in advance. I picked up my phone. I needed confirmation. I pressed the record button on my external hard drive, set the phone to speaker, and dialed PureBirth again. When Sarah answered, I let my voice tremble, pitching it up into the register of a confused, overwhelmed pensioner. Hello, Sarah? This is Evelyn Hart again. I am just so confused about all these papers. Oh, Mrs. Hart. Sarah sighed, her voice dripping with condescending patience. It is very standard. What do you not understand? Well, I just do not remember setting this up. I stammered. Did I really do all this? Maybe I am getting forgetful. I held my breath. This was the trap. Mrs. Hart. Please do not worry yourself, Sarah said, her guard dropping completely. To be honest, most of our clients find the paperwork tedious. It is very common for the younger generation to handle the administration. Your daughter-in-law simply facilitated the process using your verified credentials. We see it all the time with the grandparent legacy packages. She did the heavy lifting for you. So, it is normal for her to sign for me? I asked, gripping the edge of my desk. She acted as your authorized proxy based on the initial digital consent. Sarah confirmed. She is a very devoted daughter-in-law. You should be grateful she handled the boring parts. I ended the call. I saved the audio file as Exhibit A, admission of proxy. They thought they were dealing with a senile old woman who would be flattered to be involved. They did not know they were speaking to a woman who could trace a shell company through 3 layers of tax filings. I looked closer at the email address Sarah had sent the contract from. It did not end in a standard hospital domain. It ended in https www.google.com search qpbwealthadvisors.com. I typed the address into my browser. It was not a medical site. It was a financial services page, filled with stock photos of smiling seniors and golden retrievers. PureBirth was not just delivering babies, they were running a multi-level marketing scheme disguised as family financial planning. They targeted new parents, convinced them to buy legacy packages, and then coached them on how to get their parents to foot the bill under the guise of intergenerational wealth building. I spent the next 2 hours digging through public court records in other states. I found a similar case in Florida and another in Minnesota. Both involved PureBirth. Both involved grandparents who claimed they had been signed up for loans they did not understand. And both cases had been settled out of court with strict non-disclosure agreements. My phone rang, shattering the silence. It was Ryan. Mom. What the hell are you doing? He shouted the moment I answered. I flinched, but my hand remained steady on the mouse. Hello to you too? Ryan. Lila is crying in the bathroom, he said, his voice thick with accusation. The hospital called her. They said you are harassing the billing department. They said you are threatening to pull the funding for Jonah's birth. How could you be so selfish? Do you want them to kick your grandson out on the street? The manipulation was so sharp, it almost drew blood. Lila had already spun the narrative. I am not harassing anyone. Ryan, I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. I just had some questions about the interest rate. You know how I am with details. Well, stop it, he snapped. You are stressing Lila out, and her milk is already having trouble coming in. Just pay the bill. Mum, you have the money. Stop making this about you. He hung up. I stared at the phone. My son was gone. He was a ventriloquist's dummy, and Lila's hand was working his mouth. I stood up and walked to the wall of my study. I took a roll of painter's tape and started sticking up the printed pages. The email with the hidden text, the transcript of Sarah's call, the settlement records from Florida. And then I printed out one last document I had found while searching the Texas Business Registry. It was a filing for a limited liability company formed 6 months ago. The address listed was Ryan and Lila's house in Dallas. The name of the company was Hart Family Nest Fund, LLC. I ran my finger over the members list. Lila Brooks Hart was listed as the manager, but the primary capital contributor, listed with a 90% stake, was Evelyn Hart. I had never heard of this company in my life. They had not just stolen $18,000 for a birth. They had incorporated my name into a business I did not own, likely to funnel money I did not know I had. This was not a bill. This was an embezzlement operation, and it was happening under my own roof. I drove to the county clerk's office with a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The digital trail was frightening, but I needed physical paper. I needed to see the wet signatures and the official stamps. When the clerk handed me the file for Hart Family Nest Fund, LLC, my hands shook so badly I had to set the papers down on the wooden counter to read them. The registered address was my son's home in Dallas. The registered agent was Lila Brooks Hart. But there, listed as the primary capital contributor with a 90% stake, was Evelyn Hart. I turned the page and felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just a shell company. There was a lien recorded against my property here in Albuquerque. A secondary mortgage had been taken out 3 months ago through a small regional bank in Oklahoma, securing a line of credit for the LLC. I had not signed those papers. I had not stepped foot in a bank in Oklahoma in 20 years. I pulled out my phone and called the bank's verification line, using my old voice, the one that sounded like a compliance officer, not a grandmother. After 10 minutes of navigating security questions, the loan officer confirmed the details. The documents were executed electronically. Mrs. Hart, the officer said, sounding bored. The IP address for the signature originated in Dallas, Texas, on November 12th. November 12th. I closed my eyes. I had been visiting Ryan and Lila that week. I remembered the day clearly. We had gone to the park, but I had left my purse at the house because Lila offered to carry my wallet in her diaper bag so I would not have to lug a heavy tote around. She had my driver's license. She had my phone while I was playing with the neighbor's dog. She had everything she needed to verify my identity for a remote closing. If I did not stop this, in 6 months, when the introductory interest rate expired and the balloon payments began, they would default. The bank would not come for Ryan's house. They would come for mine. My paid-off home, my sanctuary, was the collateral for their fantasy life. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse and opened the next file, the credit card statements for the LLC. Ryan's name was on the card. He was the authorized user. I scanned the expenses. hoping to see medical bills or baby supplies. Instead, I saw a hemorrhage of indulgence, day spas, steakhouses, high-end maternity boutiques. But as I looked closer at the digital receipts attached to the statement, I noticed something specific. The signature on the receipts was never Ryan's messy scrawl. It was always Lila's looping, artistic cursive. Then I saw the transfers. Every 2 weeks. A sum of $500 was transferred from the LLC's operating account to a personal account held by a man named Cole Mercer. I frowned. I had seen that name on a pamphlet in Lila's kitchen once. He was listed as a senior wealth architect for a partner organization of Pure Birth. I did a quick search on my phone. Cole Mercer was not just a financial advisor. His social media profile picture showed him at a beach resort, his arm draped possessively around a woman whose face was turned away, but whose blonde hair was unmistakably Lila's. The photo was dated 2 years ago, long before she married Ryan. The picture was becoming clear. This was not just a desperate young couple needing money. This was a funnel. My retirement and my home were being siphoned through a fake company used to buy a lifestyle for my daughter-in-law, and then kicked back to her old flame under the guise of consulting fees. I was done being the victim. I drove straight to the offices of Grey Line Legal Group, a firm known for being expensive and ruthless. I did not have an appointment. But when you tell the receptionist you have evidence of a multi-state financial fraud ring, they tend to find a slot for you. I sat across from Marcus, a young associate with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my first car. I laid it all out. The legacy family package, the hidden sponsorship clause, the unauthorized LLC, the mortgage fraud, and the payments to Cole Mercer. Marcus read through the file in silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock and the rustle of paper. After 20 minutes, he stopped at the foreclosure warning I had drafted based on the mortgage terms. He looked up, and the professional detachment in his eyes had been replaced by genuine shock. "Mrs. Hart," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "I see family disputes all the time. Usually, it is a son stealing a few checks or a daughter borrowing a credit card." He tapped the photo of the Pure Birth contract. "This is not that," he continued, his voice low and serious. "If what you have found is accurate, your daughter-in-law is not just playing you. She is running a sophisticated extraction model. Pure Birth gets the medical fees. This Cole Mercer gets the consulting kickbacks, and the grandparents are left holding the debt. She is not just a bad daughter-in-law. She is an operative. Can we stop them?" I asked, my voice steady. "Stop them?" Marcus smiled, a cold, predatory smile that made me glad he was on my side. "Mrs. Hart, by the time we are done, they will wish they had never learned to spell your name." I drove back to Dallas not as a grandmother, but as a plaintiff. The passenger seat, which had previously held a soft, yellow blanket, was now occupied by a heavy briefcase and Marcus, my attorney from Grey Line Legal. We parked outside a rundown diner on the outskirts of the city, a neutral ground far away from the polished veneer of the Starlight Center. I asked Marcus to wait in the car. I needed to look my son in the eye without a suit of armor standing between us. Ryan was already sitting in a corner booth, staring into a black coffee. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes speaking of sleepless nights with a newborn. But when I sat down, he did not smile. He flinched. I wasted no time on pleasantries. I pulled the manila envelope from my bag and slid the mortgage documents across the sticky Formica table. The paper made a sharp slapping sound that cut through the clatter of silverware. "Tell me you did not know," I said, my voice low and steady. Tell me you did not know they took a second mortgage out on my home? Ryan picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the lines without really reading them. He let out a sigh that sounded more like a whine. Mom, stop being dramatic, he said, avoiding my gaze. Lila explained this. It is just a tax solution. The LLC helps. Optimize your assets for inheritance taxes. She is doing you a favor. A favor, I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Is that what she told you? Did she also tell you that I am the 90% stakeholder in a company I never agreed to form? You signed the papers. Mom? Ryan snapped, his voice rising enough to turn a few heads. You always do this? You sign things without reading them, and then play the victim when you do not understand the strategy. Lila is trying to build a future for us, and you are treating her like a criminal. I reached into the envelope again. This time, I pulled out the credit card statements and the log of transfers to Cole Mercer. I fanned them out like a winning poker hand. Look at the dates. Ryan, I commanded. Look at the locations. The Golden Door Spa, the Chop House. $500 here, $1,000 there. And look at these transfers. Who is Cole Mercer? Ryan frowned, picking up the sheet. I don't know. Maybe a vendor? He is her ex-boyfriend, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And he is a consultant for Pure Birth. This is not money for the baby. This is money for the nights you are working late. This is money for the life she lives when you are not looking. Ryan's face went pale. The defiance drained out of him, replaced by the terrified look of a little boy who broke a window. He slumped against the vinyl seat. She told me the LLC had to be in her name as manager because you get confused easily. He whispered, his voice trembling. She said your family never trusted outsiders, so we had to keep it tight. I just wanted peace. Mum, I just signed what she gave me because I wanted her to stop yelling. We are going to the police. Ryan, I said. Panic flared in his eyes. He reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. No, Mom, you can't. Pure Birth. They are huge. They have a legal team that will crush us. If we sue, they will call in the loans. We will lose everything. Just let it go. I will pay you back eventually. He was not worried about justice. He was worried about the inconvenience. He was more afraid of his wife and her bosses than he was of seeing his mother lose her home. Before I could answer, the bell above the diner door jingled. I felt a chill run down my spine before I even turned around. Mum, Evelyn Lila, stood there, framed by the doorway, holding a car seat with a sleeping Jonah inside. She was dressed in soft pastels, looking every bit the exhausted but radiant new mother. She walked over to our booth, ignoring the tension thick enough to choke on, and set the car seat on the table. I tracked Ryan's phone, she said with a bright, terrifying smile. I figured since we are having a family meeting, Jonah should be here too. She sat down next to Ryan, boxing him in. She reached out and placed her hand over his, squeezing it until her knuckles turned white. Then she looked at me, and the smile vanished. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. This is a misunderstanding, she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. This is just complex financial structuring. You are just angry because you feel left out. I am angry because you committed fraud, I said, meeting her stare. I have the logs. Lila, I have the IP addresses. I know about Cole. Lila did not flinch. She leaned forward, bringing her face close to mine over the sleeping baby. "Go ahead," she whispered. "Call the FBI. Drag this into court. But know this, Evelyn, if Ryan and I go down for this, we go down together. Do you want Jonah to visit his father through a glass wall? If you pursue this, your grandson grows up without a mother or a father. Is your house worth that?" She sat back and smiled loudly for the waitress who was approaching with a water pitcher. "Grandma is just so worried about the baby," Lila chirped. I looked at my son. He was looking down at his hands, refusing to defend me. I looked at Lila, smug and victorious. And then I looked at Jonah, sleeping innocently in the middle of a war zone. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought love would make me fold. But they had forgotten that to save the limb, sometimes you have to break the bone. Lila's threat to remove Jonah from my life was meant to freeze me with fear. She banked on the idea that a grandmother would burn her own financial security to keep the peace, but she forgot that before I was a grandmother, I was a woman who balanced ledgers for a living. I knew that you never negotiate with a debtor who has already defaulted on their integrity. That same night, I did not go to sleep. Instead, I scanned every document, every distorted text message, and every forged signature. I compiled a digital dossier that was cold, precise, and damning. I sent it to the office of the Texas Attorney General and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I added a cover letter emphasizing a specific phrase: systematic predatory lending targeting the elderly through familial proxies. 3 days later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was not a robotic customer service agent, but a man with a tone like gravel and iron. "Mrs. Hart. My name is Adam Monroe. I am a federal financial inspector." He said, "I have been trying to pin down the Pure Birth group for 2 years. I have seen hundreds of complaints. But, usually, the victims are too ashamed or too confused to provide paper trails. You just handed me the keys to the castle." We met 48 hours later in a secure conference room in downtown Dallas. Marcus, my lawyer from Gray Line Legal, sat to my right. Monroe sat across from us, surrounded by stacks of files that looked identical to mine. He did not waste time with small talk. He opened a folder and laid out photos of a grandmother in Florida and a grandfather in Minnesota. Both of them signed the Legacy Family Package, Monroe said, tapping the photos. Both of them thought they were just co-signing for a nursery upgrade. Both of them lost their homes when the balloon payments hit. Pure Birth settled with them privately to keep it quiet. We knew the what. But until you sent your files, Mrs. Hart, we did not know the how. Monroe pulled out a flowchart that looked like a corporate hierarchy, but twisted. He placed a picture of Cole Mercer at the top. "You identified Mercer as your daughter-in-law's lover." Monroe said, "He is actually much more than that. He is the regional director of financial products for Pure Birth. And this." He slid a list across the table. It was a sales ranking sheet, is the internal leaderboard for their grandparent legacy program. "Look at number 3. I looked. There, in bold print, was the name Lila Brooks Hart. She is not just a victim of a bad loan. Mrs. Hart, Monroe said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She is an employee. Pure Birth recruits young women, trains them in emotional manipulation, and gives them scripts on how to guilt-trip in-laws into signing over assets. They call them family ambassadors. Your daughter-in-law is one of their top performers. The air left my lungs. the accidental phone call, the tearful plea for family unity, the way she had isolated me at the hospital. It was not just cruelty. It was a script. It was a business model. Monroe opened the door, and 3 other people walked in. There were 2 elderly women from Houston and a shaky-looking grandfather from Tulsa. We did not know each other, but as we began to speak, the stories were terrifyingly identical. She told me, "Mom, just sign here. You trust me, right?" One of the women from Houston said, wiping her eyes. He said, "Dad, it is just to verify your identity for the insurance." The man from Tulsa added, his hands trembling on the table. It was an assembly line of betrayal. Monroe leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Mrs. Hart, because Lila is a registered agent of the company, and because she used the mail and interstate wire transfers to defraud you. This is no longer a civil dispute. This is federal wire fraud and racketeering. If you agree to be our lead witness, we can open a criminal investigation that takes down the whole company." He paused, looking at me with sympathy that I did not want. "But you need to know, if we pull this thread, it will wrap around everyone in that house. Ryan signed those checks. Ryan is on the LLC. He claims ignorance, but in the eyes of the law, he is an accomplice." I stared at the polished wood of the table. I thought of Ryan, my little boy who used to scrape his knees playing soccer. I thought of how he had sat in that diner and told me to let them rob me just so he could have a peaceful life. And then I thought of Jonah. If I did nothing, Jonah would be raised by a mother who saw family members as income streams and a father who was too weak to stop her. "Mrs. Hart," Marcus asked softly, "are you ready to do this?" I looked up at Monroe. "My son. He made his choice when he told me to go home that night," I said, my voice shaking only slightly. "Do what you have to do. I will not let my grandson grow up thinking this is what family means." I convinced Inspector Monroe and Marcus to give me one last opportunity to enter the lion's den. I told them I needed closure, but the truth was that I needed to hand them the final nail for the coffin myself. I also needed to hold my grandson one more time before the world crashed down around him. I arrived at Ryan's house in Dallas with a document folder tucked under my arm. Inside was a family financial restructuring agreement that Marcus had drafted specifically to be vague. It was bait, pure and simple, designed to look like a surrender. When I walked into the living room, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Ryan was pacing by the window, looking pale and nervous, but Lila was sitting on the plush beige sofa, radiating the confidence of a woman who thought she had won. Jonah was in a bassinet next to her, kicking his legs. "I am glad you came to your senses." "Mom," Ryan said, though he would not meet my eyes. "I just want peace." I lied, keeping my voice soft and defeated. "I had my lawyer draw this up. It consolidates the debts. I will agree to keep the line of credit open on my house, provided we formalize the repayment terms." Lila reached out and snatched the papers from my hand before Ryan could even move. She did not look at the repayment schedule. She flipped straight to the asset distribution page. I watched her eyes narrow as she read the legal jargon. I reached into my pocket and silently pressed the button on the digital recorder disguised as a ballpoint pen. "This is a good start." "Mum, Evelyn?" Lila said, uncapping a red pen she had pulled from her purse. "But the language here is too loose. If we want the bank to really trust the LLC, we need collateral that is more direct." She began to scribble furiously on the margin of the document. "I am adding a clause here. she murmured, her voice taking on a professional, lecturing tone. It states that you voluntarily transfer 50% of the equity in your Albuquerque home to the Jonah Hart Education Trust, immediately reversible only upon death. I feigned shock, letting my hand tremble as I reached for my water glass. 50%. That is my entire retirement safety net. Lila, is that really necessary? It is standard, she said quickly, not looking up. It is the best way to shield assets from inheritance tax. Trust me. I have helped 2 other families structure their estates exactly like this last month. It is part of the platinum tier strategy. I blinked, acting confused. Wait. So this is a pure birth program? I thought this was just a family arrangement. Lila froze for a split second, then smiled that sickly sweet smile. Pure birth just provides the educational framework, she said, her guard slipping as greed took the wheel. But yes, as a certified ambassador, I get access to these specialized trust vehicles. And honestly, the commission structure allows me to put even more money back into Jonah's account. Everybody wins. So you get paid. For taking my equity, I asked, making sure my voice was clear for the microphone. I get paid for securing the family legacy, she corrected, her tone sharp. Do not make this ugly. Mom, just sign the amendment. While she was busy rewriting the theft of my home, I reached into the bassinet. I lifted Jonah into my arms. He was warm and smelled of milk and baby powder. He looked up at me with wide, dark eyes that were so much like Ryan's used to be. His tiny hand reached out and wrapped around my index finger, squeezing it with surprising strength. He offered a gummy, lopsided smile. My heart broke and hardened at the same time. I was not doing this to hurt his parents. I was doing this so he would not grow up in a house built on the bones of other people's lives. Okay, I whispered, looking at Lila but speaking to the baby. I will sign. I signed the document with the edited clauses. I let her take the original. I hugged Ryan, who felt stiff and cold, and I kissed Jonah's forehead, breathing him in one last time. An hour later, I sat in the back of an unmarked van 3 streets away. I handed the recording device and the carbon copy of the document with Lila's handwriting to Inspector Monroe. She admitted to the commission structure, I said, my voice flat. She admitted to doing it to 2 other families, and she wrote the equity transfer demand in her own hand. Monroe listened to the audio, his face grim. This connects the dots. Mrs. Hart. It proves she is not just a passive beneficiary, but an active agent soliciting the fraud. We have enough for a warrant. We are hitting the Pure Birth headquarters and your son's residence simultaneously tomorrow morning. I nodded. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a deep, exhausting sorrow. That night, back in my quiet house in Albuquerque, I stood in front of the hallway mirror. I was wearing the same blouse I had worn to hold Jonah. It still held the faint, sweet scent of him. I looked at the old woman in the reflection grey hair, tired lines around the mouth. But the eyes were different. They were no longer the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a woman who had just authorized the destruction of her own son's life to save her grandson's soul. They thought I was just a checkbook, I told my reflection. They forgot I was a mother first. The raids happened at dawn. I was not there to see the doors of the Pure Birth headquarters smashed in by federal agents, nor did I see the police escort Lila out of my son's home in handcuffs while neighbors peeked through their blinds. I only heard about it from Inspector Monroe, whose voice on the phone sounded like grim satisfaction. Ryan was not arrested, but he was detained as a material witness, his passport confiscated, his life effectively frozen. By the time the trial began 3 months later, the story had consumed the local news cycle. The headlines were brutal, high-end birth center scams grandparents, and the stalk that stole retirement. Footage of Lila entering the Starlight Center, once a symbol of her elite status, was now played on loop as B-roll for segments about elder financial abuse. The courtroom in Dallas was freezing cold. I sat in the witness box, gripping the wooden railing to stop my hands from shaking. The hardest part was not facing the jury. It was looking at the defense table. Ryan sat there, slumped and grey-faced, refusing to look at me. Beside him, Lila wore a prison-issue grey jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, stripped of the designer makeup and jewelry she had bought with my equity. I testified for 2 hours. I recounted the humiliation of being pushed away from the delivery room door. I described the moment I found the lien on my house. I kept my voice steady, factual, even as my heart felt like it was breaking into shrapnel. When it was Lila's turn to speak, she put on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling. I was just following the corporate handbook. She sobbed into the microphone. They told me it was a wealth management strategy. I thought I was helping Mom Evelyn protect her assets for Jonah. I never meant to hurt anyone. I am a victim of the culture, too. The jury looked sympathetic. She was young, pretty, and a new mother. It was working. Then, the prosecutor stood up. He held up a flash drive, the one containing the recording I had made in the van. Your Honor, I would like to play Exhibit C, he said. Lila's sobbing stopped instantly. The courtroom filled with the sound of static, and then Lila's voice rang out, clear and arrogant, recorded just weeks ago in her living room. Trust me, I have helped 2 other families structure their estates exactly like this last month. It is part of the platinum tier strategy. The commission structure allows me to put even more money back into Jonah's account. And then, the dagger old people always want to feel like they are giving. They never read the fine print because they are too afraid to look ungrateful. It is the easiest money on the table. The silence that followed was absolute. Lila's face drained of colour. The sympathy in the jury box evaporated, replaced by cold disgust. She stopped crying. Her jaw set hard, and she glared at the prosecutor with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. But the final blow came from an unexpected direction. A frail woman named Mrs. Higgins, the grandmother from Houston whom I had met with Inspector Monroe, took the stand. She squinted at the defense table. Mrs. Higgins, do you recognize the defendant? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Mrs. Higgins said, pointing a shaking finger at Lila. That is the woman from the video, the training video they sent us. She was not listed as a mother. She was introduced as the senior financial closer. She gave a tutorial on how to overcome objections from stubborn in-laws. The gasp in the room was audible. Lila was not a confused daughter-in-law. She was a trainer. She was the architect of the pitch. Finally, Ryan took the stand. He looked like a ghost. Under cross-examination, he crumbled. Did you read the documents before asking your mother to sign them? The prosecutor asked. No, Ryan whispered. Did your mother warn you? Did she try to show you the evidence? Yes, Ryan said, tears finally spilling down his face. But I did not want to look. I did not want to lose my wife. I did not want to lose my son. So I just looked away. It was the confession of a coward, and it hurt more than Lila's malice. The judge called for a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. As the bailiff moved to cuff Lila to escort her to the holding cell, she passed by the front row where I was sitting. She stopped for a fraction of a second. The mask of the weeping victim was gone. She leaned in, her voice a low, venomous hiss that only I could hear. "You think you won," she whispered, her eyes black and dead. "You destroyed your son's life to save a few dollars. You will die alone. Evelyn. No one wants to be the descendant of a traitor who sells out her own family." She was shoved forward by the guard, but I did not flinch. I did not look away. I watched her walk through the door, and for the first time in months, I felt entirely calm. I am not alone, I thought. I am the only one in this room who is free. The gavel hit the woodblock with a sound that felt less like a judgment and more like the breaking of a fever. The judge did not mince words. He declared Pure Birth and its executive leadership guilty of racketeering and organized fraud. Lila, identified as an independent principal agent, was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution alongside the company. But the sentence that rang loudest in my ears was the ban she was permanently prohibited from working in any sector of the financial or healthcare industries. The judge cited my case specifically, establishing a new legal precedent for what he called familial proxy fraud, ensuring that future grandmothers would not be so easily silenced by the people they loved. As the bailiffs led Lila away, she did not scream. She just looked at me, her face a mask of shock, finally realizing that her charm had hit a wall it could not manipulate. Outside the courtroom, the air felt cleaner. Marcus, my attorney from Greyline Legal, walked up to me with a rare, genuine smile. "I have better news. Evelyn," he said, handing me a final decree. Because we proved the signature was forged and the notarization was faked via a Dallas IP address, the court has voided the secondary mortgage on your home entirely. The bank has to seek repayment from the assets seized from Pure Birth. You do not owe a dime. Your house is free and clear. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 months. My home was safe. Ryan was waiting for me near the steps, holding Jonah. He looked older, tired, but for the first time in a long time, he looked like himself. He hesitated, then walked over. "Mum," he said, shifting his weight. I need to tell you something. 2 days ago, Lila sent me an encrypted email from a burner account. She asked me to destroy her laptop hard drive before the feds got it. She said if I did it, she would make sure I got custody when she got out. I stiffened, and I printed it, Ryan said, his voice breaking, and I gave it to the prosecutor. That was the evidence that proved intent. He looked down at his son. "I am sorry, Mom. I was so afraid of being alone that I let myself become a monster." I reached out and touched his arm. I could not forget what he had done, but I could forgive who he was trying to become. "Pack your bags," I said firmly. "You and Jonah are coming to Albuquerque. I will help you get back on your feet. But there is a condition. You are going to join a counseling group for financial abuse survivors. You need to learn how to say no. Ryan, you need to learn that love is not about compliance." 2 weeks later, I sat in the office of a private trust attorney. I established the Jonah Hart Education Trust. I transferred the majority of my liquid assets into it, sealing it with an ironclad clause. No biological parent or guardian may access these funds for personal maintenance, debts, or lifestyle expenses under any circumstances. The final loose end came a month later. My phone rang with a collect call from a federal penitentiary. I accepted it. Mom Evelyn. Lila's voice came through, tinny and distant. She sounded desperate. Please. I can change. Don't let Jonah grow up thinking his mother is a criminal. Help me with the appeal. Give me a second chance. For Jonah. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the mountains. I am giving Jonah a chance, I said, my voice cold and final. I am going to raise him to be a man who earns his way. I will raise him to never look at a family member and see a paycheck. That is the best thing I can do for him. And keeping him away from you is the only way to do it. I hung up before she could answer. That was 3 years ago. Now. As I sit here telling you this story, I am watching Jonah on the living room rug. He is building a tower out of colourful blocks, laughing as he knocks it down. The smell of brewing coffee fills the room. My house. My coffee. My peace. I did not let the anger consume me. I used it. I turned it into a shield for this little boy. I looked directly into the camera lens, taking a sip from my mug. The day my son kicked me out of that delivery room, he thought I would just drive home, cry a little, and stay silent. He and his wife thought I was just a lonely old woman desperate for connection. They never imagined that, in that exact moment. They had just kicked the only woman on earth who knew the banking system well enough to bring their entire dirty empire crashing down. But I did exactly that. And I did it for the little boy playing right there, the one who calls me Grandma. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Today, are you listening while cooking dinner in London? Or maybe on your morning commute in New York? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about how we fight back and protect our families, please subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel. Smash that like button and hit the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it.